Welcome to my homeschool room. My name is Teresa Wiedrich, and I am the homeschool coach over at Capturing the Charmed Life. I'm here to help you turn your homeschool challenges into your homeschool charms. Welcome to my room. I didn't clean up for you, and I did it on purpose, because if you know me in real time, you know that I will definitely clean up for you before you come. In fact, someone yesterday said I must be a perfectionist because my house is always clean, and I had to laugh because it's not. And even the last few months, I had a really good friend show up unexpectedly, and my house was way dirtier than it ever is, and I was mortified and could not put the broom down, even though she said, we're friends, we can do this. And I'm like, I can't do this. I'm not a perfectionist, not anymore. But I do want you to see my room because this is homeschool life. I'm going to introduce you to my room, but I'm going to tell you the same thing that I do on my blog, and it's this. We don't actually use the homeschool room like a classroom. Maybe 20 minutes each week in the last few years for a geography class. And sometimes kids get away in here for quiet. Sometimes my husband does. Sometimes I have Zoom meetings in here. And obviously I'm recording in here. And I've created a greenhouse in here. My son's aquarium is in here. My husband sometimes works in here like an office. It's a great room. It's not officially always a classroom, but I'm going to tell you or introduce you to my room because 5 years ago, my intention was to create this room for the purpose of my homeschool. So you can decide if you need a room like this. So I'm going to just pick you up and turn you around. Can you see what we put at the top of that wall? It's the periodic table. We have definitely spent some time memorizing the periodic table of elements. There's really fun videos online on YouTube that are very catchy and make the kids get interested in memorizing the periodic table of elements, which is always changing. But there's also great books that actually explain how each of the elements contribute to our tangible world. And those just make science really interesting for some of my kids. And of course, like I said, we do geography. Don't look close because this map is actually outdated, but it's sentimental, so I kept it up. We have all sorts of other maps, atlases, globes around the house. And of course, there's Google Maps. You can't have a homeschool room without a school light, right? One of the few things that I am actually using from a traditional classroom is the red school light. And in our home, since we are a medical home, we have many posters of human anatomy and many books related to that as well. So over here, I have a closet, which I find super helpful. Ooh, I literally do that every time. It's a good thing that's light, hey? Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to my homeschool closet, and it is not curated for your benefit. I am here to show you this is real life. This is where I store a lot of the more traditional type books that we've used over the years. And I'll tell you that I've also got rid of a lot of books as we've gone by. So 15 years almost I've been collecting books for this purpose, and now I'm saving them for the grandchildren. Don't tell my girls. Okay, so you can see right at the very top, I have a whole bunch of containers intentional for little science experiment type things that we've collected over the years. Organize that because especially in the dull days of January, I do pull this stuff out and I kind of strew it like classic unschoolers, and let's see if anybody picks it up and plays with it. Then of course I've got language and dictionaries, and it's really disorganized. I'm usually organized at this time of year, but I am not yet. I'll tell you a funny story about that actually. You're gonna see all the way down to the bottom, I've got craft activities, which my kids are definitely growing out of. If only I could get rid of the rainbow loom stuff, but nobody wants to get rid of it. Okay. Other side, got the some of the boxes, the science boxes that we've used over the years. Just love them. I think it's Thames and Cosmos. There's physics and chemistry, all sorts of different activities that we've used over the years. I have many that are actually not in here right now, but I love those boxes. I have yet to try some of the online ones that are actually mailed to you, but those sounds fun. Got art books, which is definitely my thing. Got my Matthew C. collection and a whole bunch of history on that side, science on that side. Got a telescope that needs fixing, bunch of manipulatives and more crafts. And just in case the kids get motivated, I don't know why, because I've only ever done this a few times, but I've got the Go Teen Writer self-editing checklist and also the Essentials in Writing essay, compare and contrast essay guidelines, I guess you could say. They give me, I have to say that, some of the content that I have used over the years, the curriculum that I've used over the years, have had more value in teaching me how to approach different aspects of learning, like communication, more than actually teaching the kids certain content. And last year, my 11-year-old, 10-year-old at the time, memorized all the of Canada's prime ministers and the American presidents. American presidents, we're Canadian, but my husband always has loved presidential history. So these years have been very interesting. These are some of the books that we've got. Right from the very top, I have created reading lists for each of the kids. So I think my almost grade 12-year-old, yeah, she's my oldest at home right now. It's going into grade 12, and this is her space for her literary analysis. But I think most of her books that she's actually reading this year are upstairs right now. And then I have my, and this is Rachel's, this is my grade 10 daughters list. Some of those she read last year, and actually this year she's going to attend public school. So this is a really different year for me. And this is the set of books that my 11-year-old going into grade 7 child is actually going to be reading this year. Every year he turns down the number of books that he reads, but he is a prolific reader. It was 60 some books that he read last year, and some of them are simple, but most of them are not. So he's pretty easy to engage. And then I've got, tons of games and art and craft and all the books that we read over the years, or at least a good chunk of them, that I just can't bear to give away, because if there was anything that I could hoard, it is books. Okay, so we're just going to sit right back down. Had such an interesting question this week. It is a frequently asked question that I gotta say I am surprised to hear, but it's only in a 2020 year that you're hearing it, right? Just let me pause for a drink. Poolside development, it's a glass of lemonade. Okay. So to my surprise, people are asking me about grandparents homeschooling their kids. Now, I know this isn't the most unusual thing that's ever happened, but I'm being asked about it repeatedly. It is going to be a common thing because grandparents are looking forward to staying with their family and homeschooling so that they can create that family dynamic and not have to be separated in case that a lockdown or some sort of health scare again happens, so that they're separated. So I've been hearing this a lot, that grandparents are looking to homeschool their grandkids and parents still going to work. So what an interesting dynamic. I think it's a real benefit to our society that kids get to be with their grandparents. But they're asking for hints and tips unique to grandparents. And yeah, so you already know that I don't have grandkids. I don't have tangible experience in that, other than to say you're still the primary care, you're the facilitator of your grandkids' education. So you're going to want to engage it pretty much the same way that the parents are facilitating it. The goal is facilitator, not teacher. In this unique scenario that I was posed last week, the teachers or the grandparents are both retired school teachers. So perhaps they're going to learn what it seems to me most teachers that go into homeschooling learn, and it's that their home is not a school, and a lot of the classroom management techniques that they learned don't apply in their home, that they actually need to engage their grandchildren in a child-focused or child-directed educational approach instead of the approach that is very schoolish looking. So the goal isn't to bring school home, but instead to focus on the specific child in front of you. And so really the relationship might be different, and maybe there needs to be a slow process of integrating grandparents into the home and into a relationship they may not have had before. And that relationship really sets a precedent for how the child engages them. But if the grandparents are the facilitator and not trying to act like the school teachers, then that relationship will actually be a real benefit to whatever kids they have in the home that they're helping to educate. So I found that really an interesting discussion. If you have thoughts about having grandparents as the primary, engagers or facilitators of a child's education, I'd love to hear more from you. So if you have a question, you can drop it on my Facebook page, and I'm glad to address it here. What is your biggest struggle in this upcoming year, planning for the new school year? I would love to hear that as well. What are some school traditions? If you are not new to homeschooling and you've been doing this for a while, what are some of the not back to school traditions that you have at this time of year? That is actually what I'm going to discuss with you today. But before I do that, I wanted to share with you what I've been reading from my book room. This is a new book that I got last week in the mail from someone that I've known for a very long time, not personally, but I remember seeing her in conference at least 13 years ago in Alberta. And I was thrilled that as a new podcaster that I would be able to interview her and have a good long discussion about her experiences, not only with self-care as a homeschool mom, but also as a homeschooler, an unschooler of 5 kids. And they are all, except for her youngest, who's 14, grown up and established on their own. The book that she sent me was Unschooling to University, and that's a book that I'm going to discuss with you next week. But the book that she added that was just, I guess, a freebie, which I am truly blessed by, is a book that maybe I should have had 20 years ago before I had kids. It's called Parenting with Patience by Judy Arnell. I think I've long since given the idea up about being patient. I've learned that I don't need to be patient. Thank goodness. So many parents that say that I could not homeschool because I'm not patient enough. When they say that, my instinct is, geez, is that like a prerequisite? Because my kids know that that is definitely not my default setting. Parenting with patience has really compelled me to rethink my kids, and anything that I've ever learned about patience or trying to understand my kid and develop that patience muscle, I guess, is really that it's not trying to purposefully be patient as much as it is trying to understand the other person. And when I unravel the other person, or the other person becomes a little bit more clear to me and I understand that person a little bit more, then I am just naturally slower to react and more engaged with them. And so then I am less likely to be impatient. But if you want some very practical tools, this book will give it to you. And I am both in awe of her vulnerability in sharing some of the stories, but I am also at the same time, as a seasoned mom, I feel such a sense of pride that there is a mom out there that would share the stories that she has, because it makes us all want to take a deep breath and just say, okay, I'm normal. you know, I'm just like what everybody else is. And, you know, my moments of impatience that can be pretty impatient at times or in my history just reveal that I am a human being homeschooling, not a sainted Mother Teresa homeschooling. I love a couple of the things that she says in this book. Reminders, encouragements to us. If you are a kind, patient parent for about 70% of the time, you are doing well and your child will be absolutely fine. I don't know if that statistic is like valid, but I will take it. I love to hear more seasoned mom tell me that it's going to be okay. You're doing okay. And I think I do the 70% of the time, most of the time. The other thing that she mentions, she has some very practical approaches to unique scenarios for parents. So everybody parents differently. Everybody approaches parenting differently. And that is just the way we were, you know, come into the world, what we were already exposed to. And she practically deals with how to engage certain approaches to parenting. And you couldn't get more direct. She's very direct. And I think that's what we all need, especially when it comes to parenting. You know, my kids actually think that I write parenting books, which is hilarious because I wouldn't touch that. No, I'm fully aware of my faults in parenting, and I'm aware that I wouldn't want to write a parenting book. But you know what? Interesting. Judy definitely has written a book, has been super vulnerable and shared some pretty open stuff. You know, there's one particular scenario where she lost her stuff when she was slamming a printer with a hammer. Haven't done that. Yay. But it makes me think maybe, you know, maybe there's a place for imperfect parents writing books. But here's another thing that she said. Don't worry, or perfection in parenting is impossible. Do what you can for most of the time. Then you know you are an excellent parent. So that's a couple of pieces of encouragement, but there are some really practical ideas of how to actually embrace those moments in different ages and stages of kids right across the spectrum, how they might be thinking, how they might be engaging you, how they might be experiencing life, how sometimes the things that we think they're being contrary or obstinate or disrespectful, that maybe that's not actually what's going on. It's food for thought anyways. It is well worth the read. So today I wanted to share with you about our not back to school homeschool traditions, but I have to tell you, it is the beginning of September and one of the weirdest years we might have lived through, 2020. And I have had a huge surge in interest in homeschooling, to no one's surprise. Everyone has at least considered it or had it cross their minds or had someone ask them about it, I'm sure. And the surge of interest on my blog, on my Facebook page, on my Instagram page, and my podcast, it's really increased significantly. And my I can't not tell you about the new homeschooler course that I have, the How to Homeschool 101 course. The purpose is to create clarity and confidence and vision for the new homeschoolers. Well, I've had a huge surge of interest in all those things. I have been part of many other homeschool forums or Facebook threads or groups that have also experienced a huge surge of interest in homeschooling. No surprise. So over the last couple months, I have been doing a bunch of media type work, which if you know me, especially if you knew me when I was about 19, is very surprising. This isn't my natural playing field or playground. I did not imagine myself doing some of the things that I've done over the last few months, but it has been just like such a great, really cool area from personal growth to get comfortable in those scenarios. So Yesterday morning, I was on a provincial radio show and just had my electricity go out the last couple of days because there was a huge windstorm that came through. I live in the mountains with a lot of very large trees right beside me, 120-foot trees, and we had 420-foot trees fall to the ground just a foot away from our house. Needless to say, the electricity was out. It pulled down the electrical lines all around this area. And so for 2 days, we didn't have electricity, which was concerning because I had a radio interview and a television interview. I needed Wi-Fi. And so yesterday, this journalist is asking me about what it's like to homeschool without electricity. And I'm like, we're not online that much. It's no big deal. We just get outside. My husband gets his chainsaw. We cut a few trees and we drag the trees to the burn pile, or we drag the trees to the cutting pile. And it didn't dawn on me what he was asking, like, how are you doing it with homeschooling? I'm like, homeschooling, it's still summer outside. Like, I suppose I should be homeschooling, maybe. I don't know. I know it's September, but we don't usually start this early. It's 30 degrees outside. That's summer, right? And I'm going into town and I'm driving past the local elementary school and it's full, and I actually have to slow down to playground speeds and realize school's in session. He's asking me about school because he thinks we're in school. 15 years, and I'm at the place where I don't even know that school started. So anyway, I'm going to talk to you about our not back to school traditions. One of them has never been have no awareness that other people are going to school. I've pretty much always had a sense of when people were going back to school. So, but here's what we're going to do when we do get back into a more formal academic routine next week, maybe. You see, this year is super different for me. It's the first year that I feel like I've only got one homeschooler. 4 kids. First girl is 19 and she's going into her second year of university, and she's got her life established over in Ottawa, so it's across the country. So she's not here anyway. My second daughter is the oldest gal at home, and she is going into her final homeschool year. She's very independent. This year she's taking biology after she's already taken a year of chemistry and a year of physics. She loves sciences. She's doing all sorts of formal academics online, or possibly also online with a college, or maybe in a college if it works this year. She's got lots going on outside of her school. She's got ballet classes. She might go to ballet school next year in Toronto. She also has a part-time job, all sorts of activities going on. So she feels like she's a college student to me. She doesn't feel like she is homeschooling, even though officially and legally she has not graduated high school. So then my second daughter, for the first time ever, is going to grade 10, a public school locally. And that is a big shift, except that I had my firstborn also go into a public school for 2 years of high school. So it was a big shift, but the biggest shift is the first child that does it, right? So she's going into her first year ever, grade 10, in a local public school. So I might be bringing her to the bus in the mornings. Certainly I'm a resource person for her, but I know she wants to be independent, and she will be independent. So then I'm really just homeschooling one kiddo. And he is by far the easiest child to facilitate his education, or at least it might be because I've been doing this for a while, but it's also because, like I said, he's a prolific reader, and he likes to read ancient Greek myths, and he loves history. He does, he's been doing chemistry and physics alongside his sisters over the last few years, and goes into all different realms of sciences. He can write, he's very capable in math, in mental math and logic. He loves playing games, creating games in his spare time. He's that little pre-engineer, I think. So he's super easy to engage. It's a weird year for me. I'm looking forward to it because it's kind of like I have a single kid at home, even though officially I still have 3 kids at home. But that third child, or the fourth, my fourth and my youngest, is going to have me all to himself this year. And he's pretty independent, so he doesn't always want to have me, actually. But we're going to have an opportunity to do things just him and I together. So I'm really relishing those moments together. But we still want to maintain the same traditions. And so some of these traditions might be for much younger kids, they might be for a little older kids, but use some of these ideas in whatever way suits your family. These are the ones that we've pretty much maintained over the year or the years in our homeschool. Stop for a minute and take another sip. See, how am I supposed to know school started, even though everybody's calling for interviews about homeschool? Because it's 30 degrees outside. I need to go outside for my poolside development. I will stay in that bikini with a nice drink and a book in the afternoons until it gets bitter cold, for at least an hour every day. So my goal, sometime next week, always after my husband's birthday, which is September 12th, and always after any trips that we've had, which ironically my son and my second daughter are actually on a trip away from home right now. So neither of them are even here. After that happens, we are going to have our first day of homeschool party, or not back to homeschool. We usually do one or at least a few of these fun activities for the first day. We'll play a dictionary game. This is my way of introducing the dictionary to the kids over the years. And everybody gets their own dictionary because we have that many. We each have a dictionary and we race to a specific word that I suggest. And here's why I do it, even though our kids are broad spectrum of ages. So they know where their dictionaries are. They don't have to rely on screens. I'm not one of those free-for-all screen kind of gals. So I'm very intentional about when the screens come out. Also, I can introduce new vocabulary. Mostly, I think that comes through read alouds, but it's also an easy game that all the kids can play. And mostly over the years, our kids, even though they had broad spectrum of ages, have been considerate of each other, helping the younger ones sometimes. Between you and me, my youngest is a very strong speller and has eclipsed the older kids. So we also signed the sibling constitution, something that I started after we did a lot of American history in our homeschool. I let the kids write it up themselves, and I literally get them to sign it every year to agree to the same thing that we've written. And this is what they've written together. No, it's not a legal document, but it is kind of like an affirmations or a reminder of how to engage, how they want to choose to engage each other. We, the Weidrich siblings, in order to form a more healthy relationship and have a happier home, do solemnly intend to do the following. Help a sibling out. Take turns and share. Never borrow anything without asking first. Return borrowed items promptly in the same condition they started in. Respect each other's privacy. Pretty sure that was my oldest that included that. Always knock before entering each other's rooms. Give each other space when friends are over. No spying or tagging along. Try to talk out problems and solve disagreements. Listen to each other without interrupting. Take responsibility instead of blaming. Treat each other with kindness, respect, and forgiveness. I love that. No, it doesn't always happen, but you already knew that. The one thing that I've included over the last few years is discussing emotional and, emotional, physical self-care. That I know that more is caught than taught in that realm, but I always want to just, reaffirm the process of actually identifying our own feelings, being able to create self-soothing techniques, learning assertive approaches, not passive-aggressive, not aggressive approaches in engaging our own needs, and making sure that we take care of ourselves and advocate for ourselves. It's clearly the most important education. It's still one that we all are learning, and I am definitely still learning. It's a lifelong relational training tool. So I slip that discussion in wherever I can, and it's also a great reminder for me. I've got a biographical dictionary that I also share with the kids, and it really is just like Wikipedia in paper form. I think is a useful tool, especially when we're not always accessing screens, although, like, truth be told, we have plenty of screen time, so don't worry about that. But I like to reinforce that there is actually a paper version of everything that you can find online. And it's even in our homeschool room. Though anyone after, born after the year 2000 doesn't actually exist in my present biographical dictionary because it's that old. I pepper our day, our not back to school day, with back to school jokes. I keep them from year to year. They are cheesy, but fun. And I think they're fun because they're cheesy, and I keep repeating them. I discuss how I learn questions, both for the purpose of getting the kids to actually think about how they learn best, and also for me to reconsider again, how do they need to learn? How do they need to engage different things? How can I best facilitate an education for them? We might take learning quizzes or personality profiling, but we have done that for a long time, so I have a fairly good sense of that now. We discuss these kinds of questions. What are you passionate about? What do you see as your greatest strength? What are your challenges? What field trips do you want to take? What extracurriculars do you want to include? What community do you want to include, and what kind of community would you like to build? Okay, so all of these aren't fun, but they're thoughtful, not back to school considerations. But we do a back to school time capsule with Dear Me future letters, which the kids love. I don't read, but they love, and they get a kick out of it, just for fun and anything special that's in their world. We decorate our homeschool room. So we haven't come up with the plan for this year. Last year, a couple of the kids strung up the numbers of pi. Well, not obviously all the numbers of pi, but let's see, maybe you can even see a little bit of it up there. I think a couple of them have fallen off now, but that's where we ended. I thought that was kind of a cool activity that the kids did together. If you're just scratching your head wondering if if it makes any sense that we're decorating a room that we don't actually use all the time as a homeschool room, remember, it's just a tradition. It's just for fun, right? M&M games. Candy always is fun, especially when kids aren't accustomed to having candy all the time. So this is how an M&M game works for a not back to school tradition. You take a red and you tell me something about yesterday. Take an orange, tell me something about you. Take a yellow, tell me something about your childhood. Take a blue, tell me something you learned last week. Take a brown, tell me something you can't live without. Take a green, tell me something you've watched or listened to lately. And lest you think that, well, I'm mom, so I'm going to know everything, I am always surprised at the things that the kids say, and it's just fun. We always go get a Starbucks pumpkin spice latte because, we have to. We write 50 things that we did last summer. Maybe there's not as many this summer. Sigh. We'll see. My son has already done it, so he was on the ball. He's already done it. It's a thing from school, and I loved it. So we still do it just for fun. The kids make or pre-make waffles, pre-made waffles for the freezer for easy breakfast. I'm not really into waffles myself, but the kids like to have them on hand, so they make dozens of them. And I put together a book or a jar of bookworms so that for each of the quiet afternoons where we just sit together in the great room or in the family room and read our books and turn on some classical music in the background, grab a cup of tea, then the kids can have a bookworm or a gummy worm while we are reading. I also have a jar of Jeopardy candy for our Friday fun day. I'll tell you more about Friday party or Friday games day. It's a lot of fun. I look forward to it, especially the Jeopardy game. I'll tell you about that next time. And of course, a tray of apple sugar cookies, because you can't have enough sugar on the first day of school. Okay, might have to rethink that, especially now that my girls are getting older and they don't want to eat sugar because it's not good for their skin. My son is still game. And of course, the last thing, I am one of those moms that definitely gets those new grade photos. And it's not about like curating the coolest Instagram page. It's more about they keep changing and I don't want to forget this. And it's amazing that I can remember almost everything from my first baby's that birth postpartum period, maybe even up to the first year or 2 years. I remember a lot of it, but I can't remember everything from my last child. So you got to take photographs, right? And by the way, I also measure kids on a wall. Even my oldest daughter, when she was here this summer, she let me do it. She's 19. Isn't that awesome? And they're all growing, surprise, especially after this COVID thing, right? It seems like all the kids are getting real strong and healthy. So that's what I wanted to share with you, 15 fun activities for your first day of homeschool. If you have other ones, other traditions that you want to add or other things that you have, even from your school years that you want to bring into your homeschool days, let me know. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing in your family. I cannot finish this day, this not back to school week discussion with a self-care strategy. This is a self-care strategy that most moms don't even put on their radar, that frankly might take years to put on their radar. You have been planning your homeschools. You have put so much work into them. You have put so much work into observing your kids, paying attention to their interests, thinking through what is the best choice for our family, what's the best choice for my child, how do I organize this, how do I create a schedule, you know, where do I go to actually enroll or register my child. You have spent probably hours discussing this choice with family, with friends, with people that are supportive, with people that are not supportive, with random strangers. You'll be doing that more often, by the way, if you go into public during school days. But you have put so much effort into planning their homeschool days. Have you been planning anything for you? I'm going to move out of the sun. So I'm not being cute. You really do need to come up with a plan for your own self-care. And I'm not talking about Netflix binges, dark chocolate, and red wine, because, you know, I know most of us have been doing that pretty much the entire pandemic. So it's not really like a cool coping strategy anymore. It might be an addiction. But I mean self-care strategies that ensure that you are having your needs met so that you don't get overwhelmed or burned out. Long before I homeschooled, I would hear that question, like, how are you going to do this? It's going to be so exhausting. And I didn't know. I was just hell-bent on doing this. This is a great idea. We should do this. It's the best thing ever. And in my firstborn type A personality, I went whole hog into homeschooling, and probably for the first 3 years, and brought school home and was very rigid in my expectations, wasn't really paying attention to the actual kids in my home. I felt a sense of responsibility that they were keeping up with the neighbors, education. I was very much schooling at home. And somewhere by the 3rd January, I was overwhelmed. Like so overwhelmed that I remember in an inappropriate fit, declaring that everybody is going back to school. I think my son was probably 3 then. So where we live, there is no school for that age. But I was eager, wherever that yellow school bus was, I'm going to stop it, put them on it, because I'd had quite enough. Maybe, I don't remember if it was just like certain behavior that I was overwhelmed by or what was going on, but I overall felt overwhelmed. A friend of mine had suggested I watch a TED Talk on Brene Brown. And I remember her talking about vulnerability. Somehow I translated that discussion into my own world, in my homeschool world, that I wasn't really being vulnerable. I wasn't being very real, authentic, because I had needs that were outside the role of being a good mom or a perfect homeschool mom or the right, a homeschool mom that's doing right by her kids, or, that. And that was so the focus of my world, that I wanted to give them the right education and make sure that we didn't miss anything, and, do school at home and make it perfect and better what school could offer. And all of those things I had in my head, that I was overwhelmed. I didn't have a sense of my own boundaries and my own needs, or even a sense of my own self outside of being a homeschool mom. That was a trigger for me to begin writing on self-care elements. And I don't mean just like practical things like making sure to get exercise and eating the right things. I mean like the bigger things, like who's my community, and do I feel like I'm connected in my community? How am I handling my feelings of anger or frustration? That one I'm still working on. How do I handle my sense of got to do this perfectly, or it's not good enough? Or how am I handling other people's questions about, is this the right thing for your family? Or what about the S question? Or being, certain about all the questions that everybody is questioning me on. How do I maintain my own sense of self separate from that? How do I engage, doubts or overwhelm? How do I do all of that stuff? And thus began the story of my self-care exploration as a homeschool mom. Many facets, many different aspects. I'm still homeschooling, so I'm still figuring some of these things out. I can tell you right off the top that the biggest things that I've learned have to do with mindfulness, kind of the stuff that I was talking to you before about teaching my kids, about actually knowing how I'm actually feeling, how I'm really thinking about some challenging or uncomfortable feeling that I'm having, like that doubt or overwhelm or whatever. How am I feeling? And what am I doing to take care of myself? What are the actual strategies that help me deal with those uncomfortable feelings in the moment? Not just, am I taking hormone replacements or natural substances when I'm in menopause, though I discuss that in my book. How do I engage having a PMS period during, how do I address my monthly cycle as a homeschool mom, which no one talks about and really should. How to have sex, husband and wife. I don't know if you know this, but their kids are around all the time. So anyways, I discuss that in the book too, for a good reason. It's a different experience for a kid to have their parents' marriage as a, always, they're aware of their parents' marriage, their parents' relationship, in a way that maybe kids don't when they're removed from the home. I discuss, really challenging times. This is something that it can cover a lot of different scenarios. It could cover the pandemic, though. I reserve the right to not directly discuss pandemic discussions, because that one's really big. We're all still living through that. But the really challenging times of life, whether it is, losing a job or single parenting or chronic illnesses or whatever other dynamics, I make sure to address and include some of those concepts and use the wisdom, if it isn't my personal experience, from others that have gone before me as a homeschool mom in those scenarios. That's also why I started the podcast, Homeschool Mama Self-Care, is to make sure that I actually include all those scenarios, that homeschool parents that experience life in a different way than I do actually have a resource, have strategies that are coming from people that have had those experiences that I might not have and that I might not be addressing. But above all, I've learned that we have to create a plan for us as homeschool parents, not just for our kids' homeschool educations. So what are you doing to prep for your child's or for your self-care this fall? I'd love to hear more. If you want to add a note on a Facebook post, my Facebook page is renamed Homeschool Mama Self-Care. You can also hear directly from me a self-care strategy newsletter once a week, usually Mondays, and it's an encouragement to you in a different area every week. And on Instagram, that's where you're going to actually see a little bit of my life curated, but I also try to make sure that there's some mess there so that you can see this is real. I'm not trying to put something in front of you that's like just pretty, because there are always those days and there are always challenges, ones that it may take me a little while to process and share with you at a later date, but I'll always share real stuff with you because I'm here to help you turn your homeschool challenges into your homeschool charms. It's a great tagline, but it's also true. Two things I am at core outside of homeschool mom is a writer, was born that way, and an encourager. So if I can do something to encourage you in your homeschool journey or in the beginning of your new homeschool world, or maybe you're a long ways into it and you just need someone to talk about some challenge, let me know. You can find me on my blog, capturingthecharmedlife.com, or you can email me directly at capturingthecharmedlife@gmail.com. So until next week, I hope that you and your kids can turn your challenges into your charms. Have a great week.